Hello, I'm Suzanne Fye, data analyst at Iowa Soybean Association. This video explains how to use the ISA cover crop economic simulator. The idea for this simulator came about as part of a larger project to build a soil health test interpretation portal for farmers. Funding for the entire project was provided by Iowa Soybean Association and a 2020 Iowa NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant. Now, where can you find the simulator? Well, you can go to iasoybeans.com, which is our website, click on Research, click on Results and Tools, then scroll down to find the Cover Crop Net Return Economic Simulator and click Launch Simulator. So, planting crops costs money, and farmers are more aware of those direct costs than anyone else. So what they may be less aware of, however, are that there are ways in which planting cover crops can produce a return on their investment through various income and cost mitigation opportunities. Now, farming involves the dynamics of both input costs and crop prices, but it also depends heavily on long-term dynamics of the soil health. Significant long-term benefits of cover crops are cumulative, and they are variable, and therefore kind of difficult to quantify financially on an annual basis, but they're still very real. So, researching the economics of cover crop implementation takes time. There's so much information online, and not everyone has time or is able to really sift through it to find actual values and come to a bottom line conclusion. So we did a lot of this background research for you. Now, when you launch the simulator, it opens to the application itself. It has 5 basic elements: tabs across the top, pages along the left, navigation menu at the top, navigation buttons at the bottom of the page, the net return grid, and sliders. The 5 tabs across the top are the application, which is the landing page, a user guide, which will cover everything that I'm going over in this video, interactive erosion map, a static erosion map, and resources. Now, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the page navigation buttons and menu. At the top of the page, of each page, is a navigation menu. You can click the drop down and select a page from the top. At the bottom of each page, there are also these buttons. You can click on a button and go to that page. Now, there are 3 pages that influence the net return on page 1. A summary box at the bottom of each page lists per acre and field total values for any results within that page. A pink summary box at the bottom of the page indicates a cost, and a blue box at the bottom of the page indicates a revenue. Now, any changes on a page will instantly update the page summary box and the page 1 net return summary box and the net return grid. So let's talk about page 1. Page 1, field and market information and net return. Users first establish basic background information related to their field, acres, and crop that they're going into after the cover crop. They also want to indicate the average commodity price for the crop in the current market. So the page 1 opens showing a negative value because we know that there will be costs associated with establishing cover crops. Any changes to costs, selected mitigations on subsequent pages will modify the value in this box instantly. So page 2 shows the annual costs to establish cover crops. We targeted 4 of the most common successful cover crop options used in Iowa, and they appear in a drop-down list. Click here where it says cereal rye. Although costs vary from farm to farm for many reasons, ballpark per acre cost estimates for each step in the process are pre-filled in the interface. All the values are directly editable, so you can customize costs to more closely match your operation. All changes on this page will result in cost to establish, changes in the cost to establish summary box, as well as in the net return summary box on page 1 and the grid. So, perennial ground cover. We have an additional drop down where you can look at and learn about perennial ground cover. This is a new option being researched at Iowa State University. And since these trials are experimental, costs are not editable in the simulator, but they do show, there is an option in the second drop down to show first year costs, second plus year costs, and then a 5-year average for implementation. And as you can see down here, the 5-year average, it looks pretty good. So more information about perennial cover crops is available through the resource tab in the simulator. Now let's look at page 3, biomass income opportunities. Feeding cover crop biomass to livestock is perhaps the most familiar, but it's also a lucrative income option. The tool allows you to select either grazing or harvesting the biomass for forage in either the fall or the spring, or in both. Now, estimated seasonal dry matter values and daily consumption rates by cows and the feed value can all be modified, as for when you're harvesting can be the cost to mow, rake, and bale. The default values are for non-dairy cattle, and the dry matter values will differ depending on the crop that is following the cover crop because of the planting dates of corn and soybean. So going into soybean, more time is allowed, and growers may actually be able to harvest seed as a different income option. Now, page 4, cost mitigations and offsets. We start the page with state and federal cost share programs. These exist to help motivate farmers to try practices, and our drop-down lists some general values, but you really should contact your local NRCS SWCD office to find out what opportunities may exist in your area, because they may be larger than the ones that are presented in the tool. Another thing that I want to bring your attention to on cost mitigations is ecosystem services. These are companies that are forming to actually pay farmers to use cover crops for carbon sequestration and improved water quality outcomes. In fact, Iowa Soybean Association has a soil and water outcomes fund that does this exact thing in a large portion of the state. You can find out more information about it also on our resources tab and look at the map to see if your county is currently eligible for these benefits. Another company you may have heard of, Indigo Ag, works with corporations who are interested in carbon credits, and they will also pay farmers for implementing new cover crops. So cover crops use has demonstrated that there are soil health benefits, there are major erosion reduction benefits, soil moisture enhancement during dry periods, and improved early season trafficability in wet springs. that can boost and your yield can also be boosted, not only because of these things, but just in general. And we have indicated that there are some values here that you can select or change for those improvements. Now, I want to focus, though, on erosion reduction as one of these mitigations. Erosion reduction is one of the most important benefits of cover crops, but it really is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. I mean, the rate of erosion differs significantly by your location in the state, and not all farmlands are valued equally. So the return on the reduced erosion will vary. The application offers two maps, as I showed in the tabs. They are the static map, and the static map, not everybody's internet works the same, and so consequently the dynamic map may not be a good option for some people to use. So the static map has 5 levels, and you can select one. They are based on this map, which is has those 5 levels. And there's an interactive erosion map. You can zoom in to more closely identify where your farm is located. It will show roads and towns. When you zoom in, you can see them more clearly. You can click on a watershed where your land is located, and you'll find a customized value that's based on erosion averages from 2007 to 2020 and the 2020 average land value for your county. Now, after sharing a beta version of the simulator with an advisory team that was primarily made up of farmers, they felt that the tool missed the bigger picture of cover crop economics. So we developed a page 5. Now, this page does not interact with the individual field level net return on page 1, but it does help to illustrate some of the very real national food security and societal benefits that cover crops help to provide. There are no widely recognized per acre values for these benefits, but we have listed a dozen or so with ballpark values for each. Now, to summarize, back on page 1, here we see that income and mitigation choices, how they have impacted the net return summary and the net return grid. First thing you may notice is that the net return summary box is now blue, indicating change from net cost to net revenue per field for this field. And the next thing you may notice is that the values in the center of the white row of the grid matched the value in the net return summary box. And this row represents your net return if you experience no yield change. The values in the rows on the y-axis illustrate the impact of any yield change, blue rows for increase and red rows for decrease. And the values along the x-axis illustrate the impact of market price fluctuations above and below the designated grain market price. And these will only be experienced if you have a yield change. If your yield remains unchanged, there's no additional costs or revenues to the net return. So the value that you enter as the average yield on page 1 is the starting value from which yield changes as a percent are calculated. Since it represents 0 yield change, it corresponds to the white net return row in the grid. And the grain market price is the value in the center column of the x-axis from which any incremental price increases and decreases will be calculated. The 2 sliders enable users to determine the increments and range of percent changes in yield and market price fluctuations that are illustrated in the grid. The default average yield change percent increment is set to 1%, and the default market price change increment is set to 15 cents. So 1% of 200 bushels an acre is 2. So the grid calculates the value of yield increase or decrease in 2 bushel an acre increments. The center column shows the value of these yield changes at the designated market price for the crop. The columns to the right and the left show the value of if the market price goes up or down per bushel in 15-cent increments. This feature is also known as a sensitivity analysis, and it is unique to our cover crop simulator. This example illustrates a case where a user has selected both fall and spring grazing, no new fencing or watering equipment costs, custom savings from a reduced erosion, and a flat first-year government subsidy of $25 per acre. The simulator indicates that this farmer will be money ahead, even if a yield loss occurs and corn prices go up to $4.60 a bushel. So back to the tabs. I want to just point out again that there is a tab that links to the user guide that reviews the information I have covered in this video, and a resources tab that I also mentioned earlier that includes information about the ISA Soil and Water Outcomes Fund, perennial ground cover, in addition to some Iowa State University fencing costs and Practical Farmers of Iowa Guide to Measuring Biomass for Grazing. There's a few things there you may find interesting and helpful. Our goal in developing the cover crop economic simulator was to benefit farmers by providing a quick and easy to use all-in-one tool with ballpark baseline information that users can customize to reflect their own operation. We also wanted to build a simulator that provides sensitivity analyses to help address the dynamics of yield variability and market price fluctuations on net return. Finally, we wanted to develop a tool that was also a source of information about some of the key societal benefits of cover crops, in addition to your individual economic ones. Again, simulator can be accessed from the iasoybeans.com website or directly through its URL. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this video and learn about this dynamic online tool.